The first year I spent in England felt like a long exhale after years of holding my breath. I'd always wanted to get away from home, and when I landed at Heathrow, the air felt lighter, even if the sky was gray. My first year, I lived in student halls, tiny, cramped, always echoing with someone else's music or laughter. But it was good. I made friends. I learned what it felt like to be on my own, no one watching my every move. Second year, I moved into a house with 3 friends. It was still student accommodation, technically, but at least we had our own front door and a cramped little backyard. My room was on the ground floor, right next to that yard. I liked it. It felt private, even if the window was only a few feet above the pavement. I smoked out there every day, standing in the cold, watching the sky change. The wooden door at the end of the yard was always closed, thin, warped, barely held shut with a bit of string and a latch. Beyond it, just the alley where we put bins and broken furniture. Sometimes I'd hear neighbors, but mostly it was quiet. Our neighbors on the right were 5 men, way older than us, maybe late 20s or even 30s. They never seemed to go to classes, always up late, always shouting at each other. I tried not to judge, but something about them made me uneasy. One night, I heard screaming, real, gut-deep screaming. My flatmates and I ran outside. The neighbor was in the street, bleeding from his arm and head, clothes torn. The police were already there, blue lights flickering against the brick. I remember the smell of burnt plastic, sharp and sour, coming from their open door. We didn't know what to do. My friend ran inside for a towel. I gave the man an old shirt. He kept muttering nonsense, slurring his words, and tried to grab my arm, grinning like it was a joke. He reeked of weed, but I was too focused on the blood. The police hauled his flatmate away, kitchen knife still on the ground. Afterward, the street emptied out. The police didn't say much. The man we'd helped just wandered off, stoned and mumbling. I locked our door and tried to forget it. But I kept thinking about the knife, the way he'd looked at me, like he knew something I didn't. For weeks, I tried to avoid him. But sometimes I'd see him on the street, eyes red, always staring too long. One afternoon, I was heading to the corner shop when he blocked my way, talking in that same weird, too friendly tone. I just kept walking. He called after me, said he'd wait outside my house so we could talk more. I thought he was joking. But when I turned onto my street, there he was, him and his flatmate, sitting right on my doorstep. I panicked. My hand shook as I dialed my flatmate. No answer. The house was empty. So I waited by the shop, watching them from behind a rack of crisps, heart pounding. After an hour, they finally left. Our front door had a glass panel, frosted, but you could still make out shapes if someone was standing there. After that night, I started checking it every time I came home. Sometimes I'd see a shadow, just standing, waiting. I never opened the door right away. A few days later, I went out to smoke and found the wooden backyard door wide open. The string we used to tie it was sliced clean through. I just retied it, thinking it was my flatmate being lazy. But something about the way the string was cut, it didn't feel right. The neighbors kept fighting night after night. Sometimes it sounded like furniture being thrown, sometimes just shouting in a language I didn't know. I'd wake up at 3 a.m, heart racing, listening for footsteps in the hall. But it was always just them, next door, screaming at each other. My boyfriend Daniel started staying over more often. He said he slept better when I was there, but I think he was just worried about me. We'd lie in bed, window cracked open for air, listening to the house settle. Most nights, nothing happened. But one night, Daniel shook me awake. There'd been a bang, loud, close. I froze, trying to listen. I could hear whispering, low and urgent, just outside the window. Then the wooden door at the end of the yard slammed open, rattling against the wall. Footsteps on the stones, right beneath my window. I held my breath. Daniel's hand found mine, cold and shaking. The window creaked, opening wider. I heard voices, one muttering in a language I didn't recognize. The backyard door rattled. Someone was trying to get in, gently at first, then harder. The window jerked open. Daniel and I bolted upright, scrambling for our clothes. I grabbed my phone, heart hammering, and we ran, out of the room, down the hall, out the front door. I called my flatmates, told them to lock their doors. Then I called the police. The police arrived in less than 5 minutes. They caught one man in our backyard, the other hiding a few streets away, smoking. I don't remember much after that, just blue lights, questions, Daniel's hand gripping mine so tight it hurt. Later, the police told us they'd found meth and heroin in the neighbor's house. One man was carrying a huge kitchen knife. They said he'd gone to prison for 2 years. I kept asking myself, what would have happened if Daniel hadn't woken up? No one had answers. I moved out a few months later. The house didn't feel safe anymore. Every time the floor creaked, every time a door slammed, I'd jolt awake, convinced someone was coming through the window again. Even now, I wake up at the smallest noise. Sometimes I dream about that backyard, the door banging open, shadows moving just out of sight. Daniel's still with me. We talk about that night sometimes. It helps, a little. But I keep thinking about the what-ifs, the things we never saw, the things we'll never know. When we moved into the house, the whole neighborhood felt like a set from an old movie. Cookie-cutter lawns, porch lights glowing, and neighbors who actually brought over cookies. It was quiet, mostly older folks and young families. We were the only Black family on the street. I noticed, but it didn't seem strange at first. I was 13, my brother was 15. Our backyard was huge, half an acre, fenced in but connected to 2 smaller yards. The fences formed a T shape, so if you stood at the back, you could see into all 3 yards at once. The house on the left belonged to Tom. He was older, white, always outside in a denim vest, never a shirt, no matter the weather. He had this way of standing, arms crossed, like he was guarding something. He looked strong, but there was something brittle about him. We used to joke he looked like an off-brand country singer. At first, Tom was just another neighbor. He'd wave, sometimes shout a hello from his porch. But as I got older, the way he looked at me started to change. I'd be out back with our dogs, and I'd catch him standing in his living room window, just watching. I'd glance over, and there he'd be, just standing there, behind the glass. If he saw me notice, he'd come outside, moving slow, like he wanted to catch me before I slipped away. I started timing my walks, trying to get inside before he could come out. Sometimes I was too slow. He'd call out, wanting me to come closer to the fence. I never did. I'd just answer from a distance, pretending I was busy. He'd ask about school, what grade I was in, whether I had a boyfriend. Sometimes he'd ask if I had an older sister or friends who looked like me. I'd laugh it off, but after a while, he'd just go quiet. Just stare. I'd make up an excuse and head inside, feeling his eyes on my back the whole way. This became a routine. Almost every week, I'd catch him staring, or he'd find a reason to talk. My mom loved to redecorate, so the living room was always changing. At one point, she decided we needed a new sliding glass door for the back porch, which meant taking down the curtains. It took forever to get the new door installed. She didn't bother putting the old curtains back up. A family TV was in that room, right in front of the glass. I didn't have a TV in my room, so I'd stay up late watching shows with my brother. One night, he went to bed early and I stayed up by myself. Around midnight, I turned off the TV and the light, ready to head upstairs. As I turned to leave, I noticed a light flick on outside. Not in my house, in Tom's. His living room window was bright, and there he was, standing in the frame, just staring straight at me. I told my parents about it the next day. They shrugged it off. I tried to believe it was just my nerves. I've always been anxious. Maybe I was reading too much into it. Not long after, my dogs started getting sick. Every time I let them out, they'd run straight to Tom's fence, tails wagging, jumping up and down. Then they'd come back and get sick, throwing up, diarrhea. We hadn't changed their food. We threw out the new treats, just in case, but nothing helped. Then I noticed, whenever I let the dogs out alone, they'd run to Tom's fence. He'd come outside, reach over, and feed them treats. Tom didn't have a dog. That felt wrong. I told my parents. My dad went over to talk to Tom. After that, Tom apologized and stopped feeding the dogs. They got better. For a while, things felt almost normal again. A few weeks later, I came home from high school. My brother was away at college by then. The house was empty. My parents wouldn't be back for hours. I had a routine. Drop my bag upstairs, change, let the dogs out, grab a snack, then let them back in. But that day, I skipped going upstairs. I just wanted to see my dogs. I went straight to the back porch. When I reached for the door, I saw Tom. He was sitting on the ground, right in front of my dogs' cages. I froze. He hadn't seen me yet. I checked the lock. It wasn't locked. I tried to lock it as quietly as I could, but the latch clicked. He looked up. Our eyes met. I bolted upstairs, heart pounding. I called my mom. No answer. Tried my dad. He never picked up. I didn't think it was enough to call the police, so I just hid in my room, phone in hand, waiting. After a moment, I heard knocking. Not hard or angry, just steady, like he was waiting for me to answer. I tried my dad again. This time, he picked up. I was crying, telling him Tom was on the porch. He said he'd come home, but he was over an hour away. I just waited, listening for footsteps. The knocking stopped. I stayed hidden. When my dad got home, Tom was gone. I don't know what my dad said to him, but after that, Tom never came outside to talk to me again. He never stopped watching, though. Every night, I'd see him in his window, light on, just standing there. Sometimes he'd wave if he caught me looking. Always with the light on, just so I'd know he was still there. I never put the curtains back up. I still don't know why. Maybe I wanted to prove I wasn't afraid. Or maybe I just wanted to see him coming, if he ever decided to cross the yard again.
The first time I saw my new apartment, the sun was setting behind the city skyline. I'd just finished high school, packed up everything I owned, and left my hometown behind for college. 3 hours away, but it felt like a whole new world. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. No roommates, no one stomping around above me. Rent was decent, and the block was supposed to be safe, close enough to the city's attractions that I could pretend I was living some kind of dream. The first few months were easy. I settled into classes, explored the city, and made friends. One of them, Javier, lived just 5 minutes away, and we hit it off almost immediately. We'd hang out in each other's places, swap stories, kill time with video games and cheap beer. It was the kind of friendship that makes a new city feel a little less cold. One night, just as winter started to bite, Javier called me over. He wanted to hang out, maybe play some games, just unwind. I remember the cold biting at my face as I walked the short distance to his place. We spent the night playing games, drinking a couple beers, laughing about nothing in particular. It was just easy. The kind of night you don't really think about until later. Around 1 in the morning, we decided to call it. I bundled up, said goodnight, and stepped back out into the empty street. The cold felt sharper than before, slicing through my jacket. When I got home, I slipped out onto my balcony for a cigarette. From there, I could see the building's entrance, empty, just the occasional car rolling by. The whole street felt hollow, like the city was holding its breath. I finished my cigarette, flicked the butt into the snow, and just stood there for a minute, listening. No voices, no footsteps. Just the hum of distant traffic and the wind scraping along the concrete. Inside, I locked the balcony door, tossed my jacket onto the chair, and started getting ready for bed. I was halfway through brushing my teeth when I heard it, a short, sharp ring from the doorbell. I froze, toothbrush in hand. It was almost 1:30. Who rings a doorbell at that hour? For a second, I just stood there, heart thumping, waiting for another sound. The bell rang again, a little longer this time, followed by a soft, almost polite knock. I tiptoed toward the door, careful not to let the floorboards creak. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. I couldn't hear anything. No footsteps, no shuffling. Just that thick, unnatural silence. I waited, counting out 30 seconds in my head. Then, as quietly as I could, I slid the cover off the peephole and leaned in. My legs just stopped working. There was a figure right up against the peephole, hood pulled tight, face mostly hidden. I could only see his forehead and these wide, staring eyes. He must have heard me move, or maybe he could hear how hard I was breathing, because he shifted, and then...
I know you're at the door.
I could barely get the words out. I told him, quiet, shaky, that I was calling the police.
Sure thing, big guy.
I watched as he wiped the door handle with his sleeve, slow and deliberate, before turning away. He didn't run. He just walked off, like he had all the time in the world. I called the police. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, even as I tried to explain what had just happened. The officers showed up maybe 20 minutes later. They listened, took notes, asked if I'd ever seen the guy before. I told them no. I'd never seen eyes like that.
You're not the first. This guy's been showing up for a while, at least a month, maybe more. We think he broke in somewhere else last week. A father chased him out.
I nodded, but I couldn't really hear what they were saying anymore. My mind kept replaying the way that man's eyes stared through the peephole, like he was waiting for me to blink. I couldn't sleep. I called Javier and crashed at his place for a week, barely speaking, barely eating. Every time the wind rattled the window, I flinched. Eventually, I went back. The apartment felt different, like the walls were thinner, the locks weaker. I started double-checking everything, windows, doors, even the peephole. A year's gone by. I never heard anything else, no news, no arrests. Maybe they caught him, maybe he moved on. But every so often, when the street goes quiet and the wind scrapes at the glass, I think about those eyes. I don't know if he meant to hurt anyone, or if he just liked the fear. Either way, I hope I never see him again. Not in this city, not anywhere.